I'm glad also to be able to join this group today and speak to the group about Brookhaven's partnership activities. You all are very familiar with the user agreements and the user access to the user programs that we have here at the laboratory, but there's a broader suite of partnership activities and mechanisms that we have, and I'd like to make you aware of them and invite you to ask any questions that you have now, or I will be here this afternoon as well, and I'd be happy to chat with you one-on-one if you have questions or specifics that you wanted to discuss. So again, you know about the user agreements, and if you don't know as much about it as you might want to, Grace Webster, who is in the back of the room, will be giving you an introduction to how to establish a user arrangement here at the CFN. But in addition to the user agreements, we have other mechanisms that we can use to partner with industries or academia or government agencies. And I'll talk a bit about each of them. They're the Work for Others program, Cooperative Research and Development program, and a new contracting mechanism, which Kimberly mentioned in her chat, is the agreements to commercialize technology. They are unique and distinct from our other mechanisms that we can use to partner, and I think that's a step forward for the laboratory to have this available. So why even talk about partnerships? Our laboratory has a long history of excellence in doing basic science. And Kimberly talked about the technology maturation level being in the 2 to 4 range. In order for us to maximize the impact of our discoveries and our research here, the laboratory has recognized that it needs to do more in developing partnerships with academia, other organizations that are interested in advancing our technologies, and ultimately partnering with industries that want to commercialize technologies, because that's really where we're going to see the societal impact of our research. So the laboratory's been quite aggressive in expanding our partnerships over the past 4 years, I would say, and there's a number of activities which are ongoing, things that we didn't do that aggressively in the past, such as working with regional economic development organizations. There's a research alliance that has been formed between the big 3 research institutes on Long Island, those being Brookhaven, Stony Brook University, and Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory. There's an initiative laboratory-wide called Accelerate Long Island, which is going to take advantage of this alliance between the big 3, as well as bring some other research institutions into the play. And again, their desire is to take the research that's being generated at these institutions and have them commercialized for societal benefit and ultimately for economic development here on Long Island. And there's a couple of other examples that I have here. There's Smart Grid Consortium, New York BEST Consortium, a lot of regional New York State centric activities we've been involved in and successful at. And so needless to say, the lab is interested in partnering, and we're doing a lot more in that regard than we have in the past. So one of the programs, or one of the partnering mechanisms that we have, is called Work for Others, which, if you're not in the DOE world, it's a strange title for a program. And basically what it refers to in the DOE world is all research here at the laboratory that is sponsored by someone other than DOE, so that's the others. We have a Work for Others program that involves federal funding as well as non-federal funding. The federal funding, we get funds on a regular basis from organizations like the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the NIH, Department of State, Department of Defense. So these government agencies, they have very strong mission focus. They are looking to bring that technology maturation level from where it is here at Brookhaven to a higher level, so it can actually be deployed for the purposes that they want to use the technology for. So it bridges a gap in a lot of ways between the basic research that we do for DOE and then any commercial opportunities that may exist down the road and may interest academia or private industry. So let's see. So what work for others, let's talk about the non-federal work for others part of it. I spoke about the federal part with the other federal agencies, but the non-federal work for others is where we work with non-federal organizations, and that includes state and local governments, academia, and private business. And the work for, and these partnerships are formalized under a Work for Others agreement. And so I'll be talking about some of the specific terms of a Work for Others agreement and then contrasting it to some of the other agreements that we can use to partner, and hopefully you'll recognize one that might suit your needs better than the others do. On a Work for Others agreement, the data rates are negotiable. The Title II laboratory-developed inventions may go to the sponsor if private funds are used, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And it provides a vehicle for our research services to be used by others. There is a little bit of a distinction I'd like to make now. It may come up a little bit further too. A lot of our work that we do under our Work for Others program is with our academic partners. Stony Brook, we partner with Stony Brook quite a bit, Columbia as well. And those partnerships take shape in the stage where both organizations have a mutual interest in a particular research area, and they're writing proposals together, usually to other government agencies, whether it be DOE or DOD or NIH. And when those grants are awarded by the federal agencies, a lot of times our university partners are the lead organization, and then they would subcontract the portion of the work that Brookhaven is going to be doing under a Work for Others agreement. Under those types of scenarios, the laboratory would retain rights to intellectual property, and the data is generally considered to be in the public domain because of the public funding that's used to do those projects. If private money is being used, if a GM or a Toyota comes here and they want us to do a project for them, and we're in agreement with them to do it, they can actually walk away with all the technical data that's produced under the agreement and treat it as their own proprietary information. They also can get rights to any intellectual property that's developed by our researchers. So there's a couple nuances on the Work for Others agreements, but I've kind of given you a general lay of the land. Another mechanism that we have is called the Cooperative Research and Development Agreement. This agreement was generally developed to formalize partnerships between laboratories and private industry for the purpose of commercializing technologies that are jointly developed. So back to CRADAs, and the CRADA program can be funded. So when I talked about Work for Others, the only way the laboratory can participate in those types of programs or those agreements is if a sponsor is going to be paying us to do research. CRADA, generally that's the case as well, where the partner is paying us to do research, but there are instances where the government, whether it be DOE or another government agency, is actually contributing the funds for the CRADA. One example of that is we have the Long Island Solar Farm is located here on the property of Brookhaven National Laboratory. It's operated by BP Solar. Brookhaven, because of our access to the solar farm and our interest in expanding our solar research, we're able to go into a CRADA with BP, whereby we were able to instrument their solar production array and generate data from it, which will give us information on performance efficiency. It'll give us data on whether or not clouds influence the production output of the solar plant. So there are opportunities, and in that case, DOE provided the funding for B&L to participate in that. DOE has a program called Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, and one of their larger programs deals with solar energy. So they were happy to support Brookhaven to acquire this data, and that data is then going to be used for moving forward solar research. The IP terms on CRADAs are somewhat flexible, although they are prescribed by DOE, and they're pretty fair terms as far as being equitable to the laboratory and to our sponsor or the partner, in that each party So both parties are contributing effort into the collaborative research project. If either party researchers come up with an invention under that agreement, the party retains ownership rights in them. That can be joint ownership if it's jointly developed. And then in the case of where it's a Brookhaven invention, the industry partner has an option to an exclusive license within a field of use. So that gives them the competitive edge, the exclusive position that they're looking for moving forward for their own commercial advantages. Another aspect of the CRADA which gives our partner a competitive edge is that the results of that CRADA program are protected for a 5-year period from public disclosure. So it's a good agreement. Now the new agreement that we have, and we actually have not started using it yet, but we are expecting to get DOE approval for it next month. It's called an Agreement to Commercialize Technology. It's a new mechanism. I talked about work for others and CRADAs. The terms of those agreements are negotiable within a very limited area. DOE has to approve the terms and conditions of those agreements, and any negotiated changes to the standard terms and conditions have to be approved by DOE. In the case of ACT, the laboratory has more discretion in negotiating terms and conditions, and we can choose to accept terms and conditions that would not be acceptable under CRADAs or work for others. DOE does not review and approve our ACT agreement. So we have sponsors that come to us, for instance, and they want us to do work for them on a fixed price basis. We really can't do that. You know, our research here is on a best efforts basis where we get reimbursed for the cost that we expend. Sometimes sponsors want us to get paid upon providing deliverables to them. Again, we don't operate that way. We get reimbursed for our costs on a monthly basis. ACT gives us the opportunity to work with those sponsors that want us to work in a way which is really more typical to the commercial world as opposed to our DOE government world. So that's what ACT will enable us to do. In taking on some of these new arrangements, the laboratory is going to be exposed to some risk. Say we were working on a fixed price basis and it cost us more than we actually agreed to get reimbursed for. So the lab is at risk the way a company would be at risk on the outside. We can actually lose money on an ACT agreement. But in compensation for that risk that we're assuming, there is a fee that the laboratory will charge on ACT costs, which is different than our other agreements. There's no fee or profit on CRADAs or work for others. So that's kind of a nuance with ACT, and we're excited about having it available. We have had customers, and the big customer that comes to mind is New York State, whereby they have their terms and conditions, DOE has their terms and conditions, and you really you can't come to a middle ground because both parties are pretty rigid in their positions. ACT is going to enable us to work with New York State in ways that we have not been able to before, so we're excited about that. Like the background here, the sirens. This is just, I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but this is just a chart which kind of compares some of the aspects of work for others, CRADAs, and ACT agreements. Prepayment and ACT under CRADAs and work for others, DOE requires us to get advance payment. Under ACT, we can proceed with work without an advance payment. Again, that would be a component of the fee that we would charge. Deliverables, we can agree to milestone deliverables based on precise timing, and again, things that are more typical in the commercial world. The IP rights are negotiable on ACT. The government always retains some use to the technology because it is being conducted at a government research laboratory. The data protection, I've spoken about those. ACT does provide for the same 5-year data protection as is the case with CRADAs. And then indemnification and compensation, those are negotiated items under ACT. How many folks in the audience are from small business? Okay. Good, great, so there are some here, that's excellent. I wasn't sure how many that would be, and perhaps this is old news to you, but it's not, it's still important, I think, to convey to researchers both within academia and at Brookhaven about these two programs that I'm about to talk about, small business programs. One is the SBIR program, and one is the STTR program, both of which are intended to stimulate small business in the area of technology innovation. In more recent years, just as I spoke about the laboratory being more motivated for the commercial potential of our work, the SBIR STTR program does have more of a commercial emphasis on it now than it did when it first started. And I'll talk a little bit about each of the SBIR, STTR, but basically they're programs that are administered by the Small Business Administration, and they're implemented through funds which are extracted from each of the agency budgets. In other words, DOE, they have a total budget, they have to allocate a certain percentage, a small percentage, but I'll show you later, it's big dollars into their SBIR program. So all of the government agencies that have large research endeavors, they all have SBIR or STTR programs. So SBIR, you have DOD, NIH, NSF, well, you can read them. Virtually all the major agencies have SBIR programs. STTR, not so many, but again, the largest ones, DOD, NIH, NSF, DOE, and NASA have STTR programs. And just to give you an idea that it's not chump change, really, that we're talking about on these programs, these are the allocations for FY12 for some of the agencies. You can see DOD have $1.1 billion for these programs just in that fiscal year. DOE, you go down 188 million. So these are big numbers. They're programs that are run each and every year. And if you want to learn more about them, each of the agency has an SBIR, STTR link on their website. They differ a little bit from agency to agency, so I would encourage you to go on and look at each agency's program. It's going to give you an idea, first of all, is does your technology or your interest make a good match with what the interest of those agencies are. That's really the first thing that you need to do. And then it's a competitive proposal process. So each agency might have 2 or 3 calls per year. DOE, for instance, has 3 calls per year. So you want to stay tuned into these websites and monitor the programs, monitor the funding opportunities, and go ahead and respond to them. So they are for small businesses. At least 51% has to be U.S. owned, not YS owned. They are small businesses with 500 or fewer employees located in the United States. For SBIR programs, the PI must be a primary employee of the small business. And in the STTR program, the PI may be from the research institute that is partnering with the small business. And that's really the part that I wanted to emphasize on these small business programs, is that the small business has to submit the proposal, but by including a laboratory like Brookhaven in it, and including the unique facilities that exist at a facility like the CFN, it dramatically improves your chance for being successful on the SBIR, STTR program. So when you receive your grant, then we would enter into a subcontract agreement with the laboratory for us to do what was included in your proposal. There are phases for these, both SBIR and STTR programs. Phase 1 is quite small. It doesn't often get people's attention as far as the funding goes, but it's just a phase 1. Phase 2 is more significant in the duration of the project and the funding level that's associated with it. So you can see phase 1, the feasibility study is $150K for a 1-year project. Yes?
I just have a question on these. I'm familiar with both of these, and now that I'm in academia, more with STTR, there's a portion that it's allocated to academia, 40% or something like that.
Right.
So in something like this, how would BNL partake in something like this? Would that be through the industry side of that funding piece, or would it be through the academic side of that funding piece?
It would generally be through the industry side, and Brookhaven, you just cited an example where academia was a partner with an industry and you got 40% of the funds. Brookhaven would be that entity. You know, in other words, we would partner with the small business. It could be both the university and Brookhaven, but generally it's only one party with the business. So that's the way that works. Any other questions? So here's our invitation. This is a group that is well-versed in the access to our user facilities here at the laboratory. We want to make you aware of these other partnering mechanisms because we can actually broaden and deepen our collaborations with you by expanding the relationship that you have now as a user into another program like an SBIR, an STTR program. If you're with an academic institution, partnering with Brookhaven on research grants that are just going to enhance your competitiveness on those grants, and they will benefit us as well, and nurture that relationship so that it just it happens over time. That's pretty much what I wanted to say. All right.